Hi guys, you're welcome back to my channel, FinCorrect. I'm Olayin Kalamidi, and in this video, we'll be looking at debt sculpting. In our previous video, we've actually done some calculation around automating your debt service using an annuity repayment type. And in this video, as I've said, we'll be doing debt sculpting. So let me just give you a recap of what we've done in the previous video. So we have a project that costs 1 million naira for a capital structure of 50% equity and debt, and a loan tenure of 9 years with interest rate of 25% and a 1-year moratorium. And we've done flag as well as some calculation around the period of repayment that is left. And we've also estimated the CFADs. And there is something I've changed here, because in the previous video, what we have here is adjusted CFAD, and the adjusted CFAD is also the same thing as CFAD during the repayment period. So we have the debt service here, we have the DSCR, which is the debt service coverage ratio. We have the debt account as well, which we did in our previous video. We have the debt account, which we did in our previous video. We have the opening balance of the loan and closing balance of the loan, the repayment amount, the loan that was drawn down, as well as the capitalized interest. So we have the debt service as well. We have the principal amount and the interest amount. And I told you in a previous video that the addition of our principal amount and the interest amount, or the principal repayment amount or the interest repayment amount, is actually our debt service. So your debt service is the principal amount that has to be paid plus the interest amount that has to be paid. Now let's go back to sculpting. So debt sculpting is a technique in project finance that is used to ensure that our projected cash flow for a project, right, is well enough, is enough to pay off our debt obligation. It is a technique that is used to align debt repayment schedules with cash flows of the project itself. The goal here is to match the debt service, which is the principal and interest amount, to the project's cash flow capacity. So we don't want to raise a loan for which its obligation will be far above the capacity of the cash flow of the project. So that is why we do debt sculpting. And in doing that, you have to know the maximum debt capacity that the project would raise. Now, what we want to do here is we want to be able to determine, do we have enough cash flow to service our debt? Do we have enough cash flow to service our debt? Now, if you look at the DSCR that we have here, which is the debt service coverage ratio, it actually informed us that we have enough cash flow. And how do I know that? Because the DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio here, is actually 1.46. So it simply means that my cash flow, which is the total of my cash flow here, which is 2.19, which is the CFA during repayment period, is actually well enough to cover my loan of 1.5. So if I pay off this entire amount of 1.5 million naira, I will still have some amount left with me. And doing that, this is what I have. This minus this will have 691,000 naira as the net amount. So that means I can even raise more debt, right, since I can still use this amount to cover my entire debt service. Now, but there's a limit to the extent of debt that I can raise. And how do I do that? It is that I come to this proportion side and maybe adjust the loan amount. And if I adjust the loan amount, see the impact on my DSCR. I've adjusted the loan amount to 65%. The equity proportion has reduced to 35%. Now you can see the impact on my DSCR, which means on my DSCR I have 1.12. So that means my cash flow can only cover my debt service by what? 1.12x. And if I increase this by say 70%, you see the impact. My cash flow can cover 1.04x of my debt service. And if I increase this a bit as well to 78%, see my cash flow can only cover 0.94, and this means DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio, is less than 1. It simply means your cash flow is not enough or cannot even cover your debt service. And if you should go with this, so it's likely that the project may not be visible because your default that you've raised. In this case, we adjusted the loan amount to 780, and you can see the impact it had on the DSCR. And I was able to know this because the DSCR is actually lower than one, is less than one. And since it's less than one, it's simply saying you don't have enough cash flow to cover your debt service. So we want to ensure that if not equal to one, then it should be greater than one. You understand? We don't want it less than one. So what is the maximum loan that we must raise to ensure that we are not bringing down our CFR to be less than one? So what should we do? It is either I continue manipulating the debt proportion here and say maybe let's assume we now raise 72%, right? So 72%, we have 1.1. So I can increase that to maybe 73%. Let's say the impact. So we have one. So in this case, the maximum debt, based on the manipulation that I can do and based on the cash flow capacity that I have here, the maximum debt that I can raise is actually around 730,000 naira. Right? It's actually around 730,000 naira. But I can't be doing this always, like coming here, manipulating, changing percentage and all of that. So what do I do? Now there's a way I can actually do that. Let me change this to 50%. There's a way I can actually do that. And for me to be able to do that, let me create a row right below this loan end date. So highlight everything, shift and space bar to highlight everything, then Control plus shift and equal to on your keyboard. So create more rows. So the next thing to do here is to say maximum debt capacity, maximum debt capacity, maximum debt capacity. So how do I do that? Maximum debt capacity, how do I do that? I would use my MPV formula. So discount the cash flow during the loan period. So I would say this 25%, right? And go to the next go to the safeguards during the loan period that I have. So I can actually pick this safeguard for the sake of simplicity. Before doing this debt capacity, let me just come down here and create more cells. So I want to introduce something that is known as maximum safeguard permissible. That is maximum safeguard permissible to service loan, or let me call these. So I want to call these maximum safeguards for debt service. Maximum CFAT for debt service. I will just go here, copy this format because I need it. I need the row total. So, right, I need the row total. Now, how do I get my maximum CFAT for debt service? I will just say my CFAT multiplied by the repayment period flag. So, maximum CFAT for debt service during the repayment period, of course, and then fill right. So, I have the maximum CFAT for debt service. So, this is the amount that I would be using to determine my maximum debt capacity, because what we want to do is we don't want to raise a loan that this cash flow that we would use to service debt during the repayment period would not be enough to service. You understand? So I will just come here and use the MPV formula to do that. And for me to be able to use the MPV formula, I need the weight, right? And I need the values. The values here are the cash flows, right? Then I will highlight all the values, all the cash flows that I have here, then punch enter. So actually this has given me date format. Then I need to change that to value.fj, come to comma, apply it. So I have 742. Right? Based on my just normal calculation, you can now see that the maximum debt capacity that I can based on this calculation, you can see that the maximum debt capacity that I can actually raise is 742 1,823 naira. So, but how do we prove this, that this is actually the maximum debt capacity? Because initially when we did it here, we got 730,000, right? We got 730,000. So how do we prove that this is actually the maximum debt capacity that I can actually raise? Now, we'll be using debt sculpting to determine that. And debt sculpting is we want to align the CFAD to debt service, right? We want to align the debt service to the CFAD either ways. So but before I do that, I want to know the mass debt proportion, the maximum debt proportion, maximum debt proportion. Let me produce my new equity amount, based on this adjustment that we've done. New equity amount based on this adjustment that we've done. The new equity amount will then be the project cost, the required amount, the capital requirement minus the maximum debt, which is the new debt that we are looking at, the maximum debt, right? So then punch enter, punch enter. So once you do that, next thing is we want to determine the maximum debt proportion. So how do we do that? I'm going to be using this formula by saying 1 divided by debt to equity ratio. This is the debt divided by the equity ratio. However, before doing that, I want to add +1 to this 1. So it will be 1 plus debt to equity ratio, and punch enter. HMP for percentage. Actually, this gave me 25.72% as the maximum equity proportion. Basically, this is equity, but to convert that to debt, I would just say 1 minus this entire formula, then close bracket. So my maximum debt is actually 74.28%. So my maximum debt proportion is actually 74.28%. Now, the next thing is, okay, let me just copy this and paste it here to check if we are actually gonna get the same number. So we actually got the same number, which is 742,823 naira. And actually, that is the maximum debt capacity based on based on the calculation that we've done anyways. So let me change this to 50%. We then move on to doing the debt sculpting. So what we've just done here is known as debt sizing. Debt sizing. I can call this debt size. I can also call it maximum debt capacity. What we've just done here is also known as debt sizing, right? This is the maximum debt capacity that the project can actually raise to service its loan. So it is better that you use this debt safer during the repayment period, because that would give you a true picture of the cash flow that the project actually have when it wants to service its debt.